And I'm Dan out here in Ann Arbor in God's country.
And I'm still TK.
So you just want to pick up and run with that? What about Ben Askren?
Yeah, I always put on a good showing, unlike Ben Askren.
It's amazing.
Trash, and once he gets into the big leagues, cannot deliver the goods.
You know, for what I find interesting about this is pretty much from day one, there's been kind of like a pop culture question of how legitimate the UFC is in terms of its fighter competency and like skill level and stuff like that, right? Because they do more or less have a monopoly, at least in the States, and they always have. But man, time and time again, we've seen this. Fighters come in from other leagues, and they're at the top of the food chain over there, and they come in here and lose their first 3 fights and get cut. Actually, I challenge somebody. Who hasn't it happened to? Who hasn't it happened to? I can't think of a single person that stayed around.
I don't follow those closely enough to speak intelligently on it.
I mean, well, Anderson Silva, but he'd already fought 20 times before for UFC. Nick Diaz.
Yeah, well, there's people that come from other leagues like that, but what I mean is somebody that comes over like as a top biller, right? Oh. Anderson Silva didn't have a name before he came into the UFC. True. He was smoking fools. Fair enough.
Yeah, not no one in recent time, I would say.
No. And if I remember correctly, Nate Diaz only got big in Strikeforce, and we'll not talk about this too long, but after he left the UFC. He left the UFC, went to Strikeforce, and then came back, if I remember correctly. But I don't know, man. I don't.
Yeah. Regardless, what it's just funny that there's the whole aspect where we're going is that you get all these people that want to talk shit, but they can't back it up, and looks like Ben Askren is just another one of those people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're gonna talk shit and run your mouth, you better be able to carry it out, right?
Yeah. You can say whatever you'd like. You just have to be willing to pay the price for it.
Well said. That's right.
So
that's free advice for you to take it, Dan.
Yeah,
more than others.
Well, just like what Kid Rock says, they say I'm cocky, but I back it up. Doesn't matter.
Speech is free because you can utter it, but it's not free from consequences.
Yeah.
Well, that's I think when we start talking about the issues that people have angst about free speech in the U.S. People want to say everything and run their mouth and not be held accountable for what they say.
Right.
Well, people believe that free speech is free. It's only so that the government can't take action against you. Doesn't mean your employer can't. Doesn't mean friends, significant others. Yes, you can say whatever you want. Free speech is only free from oppression from the government. So you can say, I hate the president and not have to worry about going to jail.
Right. Well, and more than that, I think, and this is sometimes of what technology, some of technology mediating our reality, like diffuses this where people don't really believe it's true anymore. But there can be immediate consequences to what you say. I mean, just the world we live in, it's still a physical world. There's physical people around you. And some people don't take kindly to some things some people say. Nor should they. I'm not judging it one way or the other. But
I'll take on
fair
that.
Enough.
I'll take on that.
But that's what I was just going to say. Well said, actually. Right? You have to accept the responsibility for your own freedom. And if you don't, you do so at your own peril. I mean, this is what I realized the other day. Check this out. I wanted to run this past you guys. I thought of this the other day. I was running. And, man, I'll tell you what, dude. North Carolina and Falls, beautiful. So this lake I've been running around over the last couple of weeks is slowly, because it's been getting colder here, slowly the leaves are changing colors and dropping. And it's my favorite time of the year. It's just gorgeous. And I'm running around the other day and I'm thinking to myself, man, every day you get up and you have a chance to write another page or another chapter or another section in your own story, in your own book. And if you don't do it, somebody else is going to. And if you let somebody else write it for you, you may not like what they write. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. That comes down to the theory that you're the bad guy in someone's story, right? Everybody on earth is the bad guy in somebody's story, right?
So everyone's story.
Well, my friend. take control of the narrative of your life, right? I mean, that's,
Mhm.
you know, I'll tell you, last year about this time, I was out and I did a speaking engagement at Purdue. They have a big thing called Dawn or Doom. And they'd come out and asked me to speak. It was a guy that used to work with at Blackboard, called me up and said, "Hey, would you be one of the speakers, do one of the keynotes, right?" And I said, "Sure." And so mine was social media and its effects on business, society, and all this other thing, right? And so I don't know, about 3/4 of the way through the conversation, we got into this, how social media was really restricting freedom of speech and freedom of thought, because people are unafraid to say things that they never would say to your face, right? And I said, but you've also got to get to a point where we got to go back to the point where I can disagree with somebody and not hate them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fuel that we've been living under. And you can say it comes from the media, it comes from wherever, but this narrative that I have to be binary, I have to be black or white about my opinion, right? Which is funny because when you start talking about people and, you know, what I think is, you know, the narrative of a genderless society, right? Which is really when you start talking about non-binary, you know, we're saying, hey, we're going to be genderless. You can agree with that or disagree with it, but that's really what that argument's about. You can be whatever you want in the physical world, but I can't have an opinion that differs from you without you getting nasty with me, right?
Right.
We were talking about this, and everybody was in. And you know, both of you get up in front of people and talk all the time. You can seek body language, and you know, you can tell when somebody's not getting it, somebody's into what you're saying, somebody's kind of like, I'm not paying attention, or they're reticent. And everybody was kind of leaning forward. We were having a good time. We were talking it out, and people were going over tweets, and then they were tweeting live during the event about what I was saying, what other people were saying. So it was I just thought it was a really cool framework, right? But then I wanted to test, because I can't just leave crap alone. I wanted to test, and I said, right now, every one of you are into this. I can tell because you're leaning forward. I'm watching your body language, and we're having fun. As an audience of 100 or so people, we're having a good time, right? I said, but what if I said right now, I'm against abortion? And I watched this one middle-aged lady, her arms crossed, and she leaned back in her chair immediately.
Right.
I walked right up to her, and I go, you don't want to be friends with me anymore, do you? You've immediately stopped judging me in a positive light because I said something you disagree with. Like, no, I didn't. I said, your body can't lie. And I said, it's okay. I'm fine with it. And she goes, well, I'm really far. I said, I totally get that. I said, but here's what I want you to think about. I said, I'm against abortion. How many of you actually want to know why? Right? And somebody raised their hand, like, well, you said earlier your kids go to Catholic school, so it must be a Catholic, you know, religious thing. I'm like, nope. And people were coming back with answers. And now I'm slowly dragging people that sat back in their chair back to the edge because they want to find out the punchline.
Right.
They think I'm going to say, nah, I'm not against it. I'm just joking. And get everybody back to be normal, because that's what people would do. That's an apology. Right? I apologize. Is he going to apologize for saying something that offends me? Right? No. And I basically said, you know why? And everyone's like, why? Because I'm adopted. And immediately it came down. I said, if Roe v. Wade had been passed in 62 instead of 72, I might not be here. So there's a selfish reason why I'm against it.
That's 1862 for those that are
for all the viewers. Yeah, exactly. Father.time. Thank you, Dan. Here's the thing. I'm also a pretty strict constitutionalist, and there's a law that's passed that says a woman under certain circumstances can go get an abortion. If I disagree with that, then I should go out and fight to have the law changed, right? Not fight to silence everybody who shares my opinion or disagrees with me. That's the problem right now we face with social media, is you just get punished every minute of the day because you get a large enough group of people that disagrees with you that they're not going to give up until you change your Twitter handle or apologize. And then you're really lost because you said, hey, you're right, I came off what I truly believe, and I'm just doing it to hide now because I want the anonymity. That's the difference.
Well, you know, and it makes me wonder sometimes too, you know, like I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago with Bernie Sanders on it, and I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan, but I'd never really listened to Bernie Sanders apart from those little like 30, 60-second clips. And to hear him talk freeform for 10, 15 minutes on a single point, you really got a sense of how nuanced his thinking is on some of these ideas. Not that I agree with him. Right, I don't have to agree with
it. But he's got a well thought out plan. Here's the thing about Bernie Sanders. when everybody in America in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s was hiding from being a socialist, especially in the, you know, because they knew that was a death sentence of being elected to wider office, he embraced it. Be who you are. I don't have to like you. I don't have to agree with you. I'll always celebrate somebody that is truly who they are, right? Not people that are faking it because they want to be part of a social circle or part of a cause. But if that's truly who you are, be your true self, and I'll stand by you every day of the week, even if I hate everything you absolutely stand for, because you're being a genuine human being.
Yeah, and that's why I'd always said if you know Bernie Sanders was going up against President Trump in the last election, I would have probably voted for him, not because I agree with him, but because I actually believe him. And that's I don't really believe anything President Trump says because he's a showman, you know. But that's how he got elected. But I could never vote for Hillary Clinton because I don't believe her. I don't trust her.
Actually, that's not why he got elected. I think. I mean, we had two choices that we both agree probably weren't optimal, right? But Hillary Clinton is the definition of a bad candidate, and I don't care whether you like her or not. Right?
I agree.
Because when a candidate runs for office, how they get a groundswell is people have there's a lot of undecided, right? There's going to be people that hate him, people that love him. The more percentage of the voting population that is undecided about that candidate early in the race, the better chance that has to be a steamroller candidate. Right? Trump was a Democrat until about 8 years ago. Trump was a Democrat until he figured out, hey, I might want to run for president. I don't think I can get elected as a Democrat. Right. So he became a Republican. In the 80s, early 90s, Oprah, everybody and their brothers like, hey, run for office. All right? Because at the time, he was that outsider and we were insulated. Then we get to a point where Hillary Clinton just had zero unknowns. Everybody, nobody says, she's okay. People either like they want to run down the road and stand in front of her and take every bullet for her, or the other side of that coin, right? And that is what made her a terrible candidate. And there was enough, even though he's a huge public figure, there was still enough room for discussion about what Donald Trump could or could not be.
Sure.
And that's why he got elected. That's why it's a bigger climb this time, because a lot of that has been removed. We've seen for the past period of time what he can or can't be. And you either really love that or you really hate it. And now he doesn't have anybody that says, hey, it's okay. Right? But by the same token, when you talk about freedom of speech, why is it okay to spit on people with MAGA hats? Right? I think it's kind of silly to wear the hat, but it's, hey, if that's what you want to do, it's just a hat.
Right.
And
yeah, well, I like this is an extreme opinion along the same lines, but I think you'll agree with me. Like, I don't think it's okay to run around punching Nazis either.
No, but I also think, I think that here's our big problem right now in America. If we disagree, if we find somebody violently, even if we don't find them violently offensive, but we disagree with them, we start to try to marginalize them and lessen their ability to get on the public stage. Like, you look right now, I was reading the other day that Prager University, they're a conservative leaning, like, thought generator, content generator, right? And they have better than what I feel to be anecdotal evidence that Google was put them on the restricted list. The same way they put the KKK on the restricted list and a bunch of these other things. The prevailing thought is we have to get hate speech off of the internet, out of the public domain. My thing is this. I want to see the KKK on TV every single day, talking as loudly in the middle of the room as they can, because that's the quickest way for everybody to go, that's not even close to being right.
Yeah.
Let's stop listening to them. Let's stop doing everything. Make all those people hide in the shadows, and that's how it festers. And on either side of the coin, right? But you make things that are abhorrent to society, and you basically tamp them down and you hide them from public view. You're not protecting anybody. You're actually harming people more greatly, because that's going to come back to fester and get out in the public domain, right?
It provides a mystique towards them at that point. It provides a mystique. When you shine the spotlight, then you're going to know what they're really about, and people will then lose interest. Now, you'll have sympathizers that will essentially state, but they have just as much right as everyone else, and then they'll start fighting for those kind of people as well. I would rather give them the stage, see what happens.
Right. That's what I mean.
Well,
Put them in the middle of the room and go get 'em.
This is insane.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's it. As far as I see it, winning over the undecided. I think that's it. It's not answering people's questions per se. It's leading them to ask questions so that they get tied in socially. Right now, they have some social currency that they're spending and investing in this conversation. And the more you get invested in it, the more you're going to align with it. Even if you disagree with it, but you're aligned with it in the sense that now you're at least engaging in some nuanced, critical exchange, rather than just saying, look, I disagree with this, therefore I'm going to close my eyes and it doesn't exist. Right? Which just is not real. The world doesn't work that way.
I wouldn't want to go and, punch a Nazi either. I don't think it's right. Let them, I just sit there, I shake my head and go, how delusional you are to think that any of these principles are valid, that are good for the rest of humans.
Why? Well, let's take the Nazis in particular. Why in Europe in particular are they making a resurgence? Because people are starting to deny the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Right? Eisenhower, when he came over the hill and saw the first concentration camp, said, I want you to go find every camera you can find in the European theater, and I want this very well documented with photos and video. Because 60 to 70 years from now, some damn fool is going to come along and say this didn't happen. Why is there that rise? And because people joke around about the History Channel, they call it the Hitler Channel, right? Because there's a lot of effort put into World War II. Well, there needs to be, right? There's people don't name their kids Adolf anymore,
right?
Yeah.
Right? You can't kill 15 million people and actually 6.5 million, and Stalin killed another 15. But you can't do that and have people go, we want to celebrate that guy.
Yeah, right, right. Well, see, and that's my point. That's my point is to say that we're going to deal with a disagreement in view, right, by punching people.
Yeah,
I think desensitizes us to when violence is absolutely necessary.
Right,
and I think we can all agree there's cases in which that's the best forward case, right?
Well, let's look at it this way. If you have to wear a hood or something to cover your face while you're trying to advance your agenda, especially through violence, you are not doing the right thing. You got the KKK on one side and you got Antifa on the other. Right?
Yeah, right.
They're free to have their beliefs. But if at your core belief, you need to cover your face to do it, it's about intimidation and it's about hiding because what you're doing is morally reprehensible. And you know it. Otherwise, you'd be out in the middle of the room telling everybody and showing everybody who you are.
See, and I think that's the biggest part of this spotlight idea is when you listen, I've said some crazy stuff even to myself, and I tend to vocalize it out loud. And when I hear it, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, man, that's not a good idea. I should not only should I never repeat that, but I shouldn't do it. You know what I mean? And that's just the funny thing of how our cognition works, right? You leave it inside your head and you're like, dude, that makes perfect sense. You vocalize it and get it out there and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that does not sound the way I thought it did.
Right. Well, I think it's, we talk about being out in public speaking and everything like that. It's that, again, I always go back to it. Do this in front of the mirror. Talk to yourself. Get your point out there alive. And I think 5 years ago, I was more likely to say something that was a fully unformed thought. Now I have a catalog on broad topics of things that I've worked on so that what you truly believe, because I don't think stream of consciousness works for anybody, because stream of consciousness is about emotion. It's not about formed thought.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what gets people in trouble, right? Social media in particular becomes about stream of consciousness, right? And sports is easy because people, like, fan is short for fanatic, and you watch the Twitter go on crazily. The death nail of the program last night at Notre Dame, we were talking about it earlier, was, they got beat up by Michigan. Guess what? It's a great university. It's always going to be a great university. And sorry, you're not the Notre Dame of the 50s that can attract people because you were the only people that everybody knew because you could afford to get on television. That nascent, that nascent medium called television, right? And I think that's really, and people don't want to fail. Right. In terms of, they want to align themselves within their belief system with a group or a person that they think is going to lead them, because people basically do not want to fail. They want to protect their ability to be perfect all the time. And that's largely why I believe people aren't wildly successful in whatever endeavor. And that wildly successful is how you gauge it, not how the world gauges it.
Right.
But how you're wildly successful, you know?
Well, that's a great point, because I think people look at failure as being a bad thing.
Nah.
And that's how you're going to learn.
Failure is the only way to be great.
Yeah. It's how fast can you recover from any failure? That's what I hate that when people say, oh, fail fast. I don't. I learn fast. Learn fast.
You're going to fail.
The shorter you can make that window from the time of you realizing that this is not good, that it's failed, that's how you measure that's how I measure success. How fast do I realize this is not good?
But that's when people say fail fast, they don't mean, hey, go out there and be silly in a hurry and fall down and then get yourself back up. I think it's a delta between the time you realize something is not correct till the time you adjust your course and change your decision process to make it right. That, in order to do that, you have to not take ownership of some of your emotion, right? You have to go, okay, I'm not going to hold on to this because I made a mistake and I want to prove I'm right. I got to go, hey, I'm not perfect, right? If you start with that,
I agree.
Exactly. If you start with that, and then it gives you the ability to recover. Let's talk about this in terms of code, right? In terms of software development, the term rebasing. What is rebasing doing, right? I'm going to go reset the level of the code base. In large part, from our historical reference through a couple companies, what's rebasing used for? To hide your mistakes, right? There's some good reasons to do it, but most people, what they want to do is hide their mistakes. So now, when somebody comes in to buy the company or to invest in the company and say, hey, we like what you're doing and we want to help you achieve a positive outcome. That's your friends, that's professors, that's other folks that that are saying, hey, we really dig what you're doing. We want to help you out, right? In your life. If you say from a business to a personal standpoint, one of the things is they're going to come in and check the financials, but the other half that people always forget about is they're going to come in and do due diligence on the tech side, right? Everything we do in order. Do I have good network maps? Do we know where the code? And they'll look at the code base. If there's too much rebasing, it looks like you're trying to hide something, right? Great companies and great people celebrate their mistakes. They learn. There's ingenious ways that they solve problems and they grow, right? And so what I like to say, so I'm talking to tech audiences, don't rebase your life, right? Because everybody's got a chapter of the book they don't want to talk about. And it's always where they failed, right? If you're going to help people, if you're going to grow, if you're going to be a leader, you have to show people that, hey, I didn't get here by magic, right? And I think, Dan, it's the thing. It's like, I'm not failing fast. To me means I can look at something and go, this is not working. And the longer I hold on to this, the more detriment to the entire organization, entire group, entire tribe of whatever I'm at is going to happen. And it's going to be adverse for a greater period of time. Why? Because of my ego. That's what drives that behavior, and not let go of the bad and seek the good.
I'll give you a slightly different twist on this. I agree with what you're both saying. Check this out. It's usually understood that the predominant amount of publishing that happens, academic publishing, let's say there's a social pressure to only publish what we can say are positive results, not errors, not mistakes, not failures. Okay? And because of that, I think I would assert that telling people, hey, this is how this works, this is how I was able to be successful, whatever that means, is actually meaningless, and it's not helpful at all. Because what it doesn't do is help inoculate people to failure, right? And so here's a perfect example. I got a couple students involved in a project, and we got accepted to go present at a conference next month. And another team came on later with another faculty member, and we're all going to go together. And they're presenting. This is beautiful. They had gotten involved in this project with Steve Wozniak at the university. And they wanted to, this is big for students. I don't know why anybody ever let them do this, but whatever. It's good marketing. They wanted to create an autonomous golf cart that went around campus. Okay, so we used these giant golf carts like
What did go
Disneyland.
wrong?
Yeah, right. And we use these giant golf carts to shuttle people around when they're doing like campus tours, right? They're like the Disney ones, like 10, 12 people golf carts. And they were going to make one autonomous. And apparently they never got past the stage of being able to control it with a joystick. That's as far as they got, which is big. Don't get me wrong, that's big. But that's a far cry from it being autonomous. And then the project just died. Just dead. And so the student is going to present essentially a post-mortem kind of breakdown of here's all the shit that went wrong. And like almost all of it has nothing to do with the technology. It's all us and how we organize the project, how we set our goals, how we try to get different skill sets involved on different goals. And I'm thinking, man, that's a great story. Now you're going to celebrate failure so that other people don't go down that same road. That's meaningful to me.
That's beautiful.
And that's why you should, always publish, regardless if it was good or bad, because then we allow for posterity's sake, so people don't go and make the same mistakes. I'm not going to go down that path. I already know it doesn't work. These people said it doesn't work, so let's go do something different. It helps us to progress. So
I think it's the meaningful narrative.
Right. So I'm always for my interns and the younger folks, that work for me. I tell them about all of the mistakes. Here's why I know this doesn't work, because I did it.
Yeah, it hurts, right? I'll show you the scars, right? But I think in life, right, and I always go back to the leadership thing, because that's kind of where I'm at, is having a toolbox when you get older of things you're never going to do because they've either failed, you find them morally sketchy, or whatever the reason, but you're like, hey, I'm not going to do this. In my mind, isn't limiting, it's freeing. Right? Yeah. Because now I'm free to accept new ideas from the widest possible swath of people that I've not come in contact with before, and say, hey, how do we solve this problem? How do I become a better leader, right? And in doing that, and we've talked about this before, you've got to give of yourself, right? That's leadership in a nutshell to me. It's like you've got to give to everybody else. Well, how do I do that, right? I'm going to give you everything I know that doesn't work and why, right? And I think, Dan, that's a great point, because you're not going to solve the world's problems by going, I never made a mistake.
Right.
Or putting it off on everybody that works for you.
It's true.
Yeah.
If the more I can convince them that the way in which they're looking to go down is going to be painful, and I can prevent that pain, is the more quickly I can get the organization moving in the positive direction.
I do think there's value in letting people stub their toe. Right? If somebody's going to get, somebody's going to walk out in the traffic and get hit by a bus, metaphorically, you're going to yank them back before they do it. But if
unless his name is Michelle.
What's that?
Unless his name is Michelle. He needs to get hit by a bus a bunch of times.
But if you're going to, people have to learn how to recover from failure and to do it in a controlled environment, right? As kids, you do it with team sports, you do it with them. It's like baseball, Dan, I think is the greatest, one of the greatest sports tools, because if you're successful 30% of the time, you're going to the Hall of Fame, right? What better way to learn to deal with failure?
Yeah.
Right? And have a short memory, right? And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
It is.
Well,
dealing with failure is probably the most important trait, I say, for a leader.
Yes.
And if they can't deal with that and learn how to overcome it, and they just don't last. They go back to become an individual contributor.
Yes.
Well, and wouldn't you guys, as experienced leaders, would you agree with the idea that part of what makes you good leaders is you can kind of foresee where failure is going to occur? And what I mean by that is because based on your worldview, the size of it, and your experience and your failures, you can kind of see where there's a probability there's probably going to be some mistakes made in this little area. So let me buffer that so that when those mistakes happen, the people learn from it and grow, but it doesn't destabilize the overall mission. Does that make sense?
Sure. I think a lot of it has to do with me being able to foresee where something is going to go is because I go and take everyone's opinion, even those that I know are going to disagree with whatever it is that I'm doing, because their disagreement is going to have something valid that I need to consider. I consider all possibilities of what people are saying to me until I have determined whether or not it's going to be useful or not. And so, going down those rabbit holes, I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right. Dissent,
with that,
dissent is the thing, right?
Right. I want to hear all of the dissenting opinions, because there's going to be something valid that I can take from that. And then I can go, okay, in order for this project to be successful, I need to make sure I don't do these kind of things, or that I do these kind of things, because this person over here who doesn't agree, that the naysayer is going to have the loudest voice in the room. And I need to make sure I can do everything I can to keep that person at bay. I don't need to buy them over. I need to get them from being a dissenting opinion to neutral. They're never going to be a champion for me. I just need to get them to neutral.
Yeah. Right. When there's a time, as a leader, there's a time and a place to let everybody have their say in the room. Right. As a productive leader, right? One of my old mentors, one of my first mentors in the SEAL communities, and he used to come in and say, look, we all have an equal opportunity to get hurt while we're working. So for a certain period of time, we're all going to have an equal opportunity to have a say in how we're going to succeed. Right. But at the end of it, he's like, okay, we're done. This is what we're going to go do. And it was him absorbing everything we got and saying, hey, I don't know everything. Right. But certain times he'd come in and he'd say, hey, this is an arbitrary decision. Right. And a lot of times he was told what he had to do. Right. Because everybody's got a boss. And the issue sometimes with people that dissent is they don't understand that, hey, I want to hear from everybody, but everybody's got somebody to answer to. Like chairman of my board is going to want to know what's going on. Sometimes he's going to say, hey, this is what we got to do, and this is why. And I can agree with it or not, but I've got to go with it, or I've got to walk away, right? And that is that's really where people get over the hump, right? Because, and it's funny because I was just having this conversation with somebody earlier in the week. I was at an event. The Honor Foundation, they help transitioning special operations veterans to be better prepared to be a civilian, right? To go into the civilian workforce and everything like that. Things I wish that I had when I was retiring, because I cut a Wile E. Coyote hole in the fence of the command and ran away, and it's not going to figure it out on my own. To some success and to some detriment over the years, right? And I said to him, and I've changed my opinion on this in the last 2 weeks. I said, when you're interviewing, I said, because in order to be successful as a leader, because a lot of times when retiring SEALs in particular are getting out, they'll call me and they say, hey, any of the software companies you're helping out, can you hook me up with a job? I'm like, all right, what are you going to do? And they're like, what do you mean? I go, what value are you going to provide me? And then we have to talk about the definition of value as you doing something for somebody that they can't do for themselves, right? Or they're unwilling or thing, but they see value in it because they're like, hey, I'm not going to do that, so I want him to do it. And we talk about the idea of contribution margin and everything else. But more importantly, I said, you're a good leader. Because they say, I'm a leader, right? And you are. But you're a good leader at being a SEAL. Why? Because you understand the business of being a SEAL. Your career has been shaped over 20 plus years on how to be a leader in this. And it started out with small responsibility and it's grown to greater. Because that's how leaders are grown. They're not born, right? It's why founding CEOs that are tech guys sometimes have trouble transitioning to the leadership responsibility of solely vision without banging on a keyboard, right? And so one of the things I said to them, I said, when you're going there, one of the things I not blindly believed, but I firmly believed in was that go ask the senior people, how many people have you brought with you, right? Over time, how many people have followed you? Because in my mind, and I still believe this is largely true, that if nobody's followed you from place to place, they've voted with their feet. They've opted out of your leadership style, and you need to take note. All right? And I think in large measure, that's positive advice to give people. But here's the catch. There's another group of people that follow people from company to company, and they follow authoritarian CEOs. right? People that they don't want people, how do I say this? The boss encourages them by overcompensating them to stay, right?
Sure.
Pure money play, right? They don't want dissent. They don't want individual thought. They always want to be the king. And if you violate any of those principles, you're going to get pushed aside. But as long as you're compliant, you're going to be part of that tribe. So externally, it appears that they have a core group, they have a tribe that follows them from place to place. But in most circumstances, that type of CEO, which I think is becoming anachronistic, that type of CEO is gotten that group because they understand what it takes to be successful monetarily with that guy or girl, and they're willing to give of themselves. They're willing to emotionally say, hey, I'm unwilling to stand up for myself. I'm unwilling to do a lot of things because I know how the game's played and I will be financially taken care of, and I'm willing to ignore everything else to be successful financially. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, there are some people that follow because they can't do it by themselves. And then there are those that follow because they want to be a part of something bigger.
Right. And sometimes that bigger is totally money, and you subjugate yourself to do that.
Right. They're willing, they're in essence, they're willing to be degraded as a contribution to what they can provide because they just want the money. And anytime you do something for the money, eventually, the money's going to run out.
Eventually, it catches up to you in the mirror.
Yeah. I think of them as social barnacles.
Yeah, sure.
There you go.
They're just kind of tagging on because that's what barnacles do, right? I mean, they just kind of attach on and they don't do much else.
Yeah.
From my experience, and it's both personal and then anecdotally from talking to other people in leadership positions and what they've observed and been a part of as they've grown up and it's funny because I asked people what they thought the hallmark was, and this is another CEO that I asked a couple months ago, and it's really started to get me to think about this. And he's like, there's two things, and I totally agree with this, and I've experienced both. Number one, they only last about 2-3 years, right? That's the max that they're going to last. And he goes, the wheels start coming off the cart. And I truly believe this. And he said it like I would say it. The wheels start coming off the cart in about 18 months. It's just, you've got people are financially where most people can't just say, screw it, I'm out of here. They've got responsibilities. And so they've got to work to get out. So those people staying there extends their time. There's that. And this has nothing to do with, this is in the military, this is in society. What I've seen is that type of leader will expend an exorbitant amount of time bad-mouthing other people behind their backs and then praising them to their face.
Yep.
Right? Recently, I was involved with a company, and this was at the partner level. And I was talking to one of the partners, and he said, basically, it's you and me. The other two, called them liars and everything like that. Right? Because he was trying to separate the herd because there was problems going on, and he was trying to phone a friend. Mm-hmm. I hung up the phone and I called one of the other partners and I go, what does he say about me? Right? And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I go, I already knew, right? Because the thing, and he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, he just said you and the other guy were a liar, and told him why he said it. And I go, so what's he saying about me? Right? Because to my face and in writing, I'm the greatest thing that ever lived. Right? That's never going to work. Right?
No.
But people are willing to tolerate it, and they're willing to sit in the room while it happens to other people and nod their head. Right? And that's a slow death.
Sure.
Right? And it's like at some point you got to get off the ride, and it's hard. Right? And I've experienced it firsthand. It's hard because you're going to have to take a giant mother may I step back, whether it's emotionally, financially, whatever that works, and then go, hey, now I've got to start over again, and do it without a safety net. Right? And that's the hard part. And I'll, from experience, the quicker you can get off that story and go, I'm going to do that, the better off you're going to be. But there's also, and Dan, this speaks to your heart, there's also vengeance, right? Because bad people, it's that if you have, and I'm not telling you I'm right, I'm telling you how I feel. And Dan, I think, you'll get into this, like, hey, bad people are bad people because people allow them to exist, right? And I spent most of my adult life railing against that. And now in the corporate world, you know, if you do that and metaphorically punch somebody in the face, most of those folks are going to go get lawyers involved, right? And it's like, wait a second, no, you want to be out here and do this. Let's talk about you not doing it to your face. And I want to hear what you have to say to me, right? Because you're obviously not saying it to me. Because then you're like, hey, get out of here. Because why? Because I violated his leadership code of, hey, it's blind faith or get out of here. And I've never worked for anybody that I want to show up the next day to work for when it's like that.
I would agree. I mean, that's, you know, where I'm at right now, you know, it's certainly, it's interesting because everyone's been there for a long time and there's a lot of good people that are there. And I have plenty of people calling me wanting to come there, but it's not the right time. You know, and that's another part of, you know, and that leadership aspect. You know, you may have a lot of good people in your, you know, your circle of LinkedIn, but don't bring them just to bring them. Bring them there when it's the right time to bring them so they can succeed, because, you know, they see something, and it's more than, hopefully they see something that's more than money, but it's about providing them an opportunity of which it's going to help raise them to the next level. You know, there's people that I could, you know, that I could bring in today, but in reality, it's a step backwards for them in their career. I'm at a smaller place on purpose to help advance this organization to the future. And so I think when we start talking about the people that need to come, it needs to be the ones that are going to have a mutual benefit. Because as an example, if I were to bring like Michel over right now, it would be a step back. He would go crazy. One, he's not able to deal with people that are at a junior level. He thinks everyone has to be, you know, the A player. And
which is odd from where he came from. It baffled me from where he came from, the thing. And I'll tell him to his face, I think that's lazy leadership, right? You don't want to continue to develop people.
Well, and him and I have had this conversation a lot. I'm like, look, you've got the trick in leadership is, how do you get the C player to be a B player and a B player to be an A player? You know, how do you get them to do that? If they're an A player, they already know it. As a matter of fact, in most cases, I don't want the A players because they don't want to. They won't. They'll do everything. They think their way is right, and they're going to go behind and do it with the way they want it being done. I want a team of solid B players because they're going to work together in order to be able to figure it out.
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it. I get what you're saying, but I also think we go back to Pierce's law, right? That, you know, 10% of your people provide 50% of the value. And at some point, stop worrying about the C players and the lower players, right? Get those. Is it easier to get a C player to be a B player? And is it of the same value than to get an A player to start acting like a leader and develop younger folks on your behalf with guidance?
Well, that's the trick. You got to find those ones that are able to do that.
Right.
Not everyone is able to be a leader. There are those people that think they are, and they're just not.
Well, the people that want to be leaders, there's the people that, well, let me put it this way. There's leaders, there's people that want people to look at them as leaders, but are unwilling to emotionally deal with that and basically say, it's not about me anymore, it's about everybody else. And then there's the folks that just want the paycheck of a leader.
Sure.
Right? And in the military, it's funny because there's guys that work their ass off to get promoted, right? And we've talked about this before. Most people walk through life wanting to appear to be competent without, you know, and they spend all their effort in the appearance of competency. Why don't you just slow down for a second and be competent? And put all your effort into being competent.
Yep.
Right? And that's not going to win you any friends, right? Because the people largely that appear to be competent, and Dan, it was what I said yesterday, they're what I call intellectual grifters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They latch onto one small piece of something and they listen to everybody. Right? and then they can parrot it, but it's not of them, right? And I tell people all the time, it's like, hey, there's a guy that one of the cats that's in the mentor program that I think he's going to get out of the military and he wants to go be an executive coach. And so obviously they send him to me, right? And I'm like, so who are you going to coach? What are you going to coach him on? Well, I'm going to coach him on leadership. I'm like, so what vertical are you going to pick? Goes, what do you mean? Well, you're just blindly going to go out there and hit every CEO in America and hope they want to listen to a retired SEAL that has no relevant work experience outside the military, right? You join the Navy when you're a kid, 20 plus years later, you retire as an adult. You have some great things to provide, but you don't have the context of what works in the civilian world and what doesn't. More importantly, you can't go pick a vertical. Like I want to go into tech companies and talk to their leaders. Why? Because I've had a lot of those jobs and I've been, from junior guy up through C-level guy, and I focus on technology every day of the week. So I think I have a decent perspective on that. If you want a clothing company or a retail establishment, I might be able to culturally, work the culture game with you a little bit. But what's the culture at a small business? Even if it's the same revenue numbers as a small tech company, what's important about that culture that's different from getting a tech company to be bigger or getting and Dan, I think you're probably more well prepared to go industry to industry because of working, kind of toiling away on the cybersecurity IT side. Cybersecurity, no matter what business it's in, right? You just have to get to, hey, here's what policies are important to this vertical and everything like that. But the people are all trying to do the same thing, right? They're trying to have less breaches, be more efficient, and do everything better for less money. And I think it translates across a broader appeal. But you believe you have to have some core skill because you manage people and you lead a business. Or, you manage a business and you lead people, I'm sorry. And if you don't understand the business that you're managing, how can you be a leader? Because it all starts with your competency and their belief that you're competent and have some relevant experience of the path that they're walking, that you've already pushed down some of those stones to make it smoother for them.
Yeah, I think that's spot on.
Yeah. So, in going back to real quick, when I was talking about the C player to the B player, the first thing I look to find out is, are they a C player because no one's given them the right guidance?
Right.
If the answer is they've had the right guidance and they're just a C player, then they're going to be the kind of people that need to be the ditch diggers, and that's fine. Everyone's got a role. Same thing with the B players. Some of them, it's, hey, they've gotten everywhere they can because they haven't had proper guidance, or have they risen to the highest level that they can, and that's fine as well. And that's a big part of leadership as well, is understanding the capabilities of what your organization and the people in it. And that's why I go around and I talk to everyone all the time. Like there's no reason why people can't stop me and ask a question. I give them every opportunity to. People that work for me, people that are peers, you name it. It's all there. So, it's a big part of it. And this is where I say that in some cases, once you are at a particular level in an organization, presence is the most important thing. There's always going to be those that work remotely, but you got to figure out how to still be present with them being remote.
Yep.
But still, most of us go to an office and work because you still have to have that progress. And as a leader, you better be present.
90% of life is just showing up.
Yep.
Right.
It really is.
So here's Dan. I'm gonna make a statement, and then it's gonna be about your A players, right? There's two types of A players. There's a type of A player that's been well cultivated, right? And he's an integral, they're integral pieces of what machine you're at. And there's an A player that's just because they're talented and they've lived off talent their whole life, right? And so I'm going to say this. I think talent is your floor and character is your ceiling, right? When you talk about the A player that he can't, he wants to go out behind your back and do it his own way, that's limiting his ceiling because it's a character issue, right? That, you're never going to rise to the occasion, right? When you get stressed out and everything like that, and we said similar, you're never going to rise to the occasion. You're going to sink to your level of training, and your training is not always about the nuts and bolts or the blocking and tackling of a job, right? Do you have the character to work? Do you have the character to learn? Do you have the character for compassion and empathy and giving yourself to others, right? And that's what bolsters your integrity, right? And that integrity is really what gets you to be a premier leader, right? And you got to ask yourself daily, like, am I the person of character and integrity that I need to be when my people need me, right? That's how you take an A player to the next level to be a great leader. You know, Martin Luther King said, hey, ask what you're doing for others. And so, hey, walk around. What are you doing for others? Like, and that's yourself. You get out of bed in the morning. What am I doing for somebody else? Right? That's, I think, that hard transition from a player, whether it's, you know, a good VP, a good EVP, out into the C-level, where now people have to start really thinking about everybody else but themselves, because they're making a plan, right? And they're creating a culture and environment that facilitates greatness. And if their integrity or their character early on, where you're like, hey, that guy's just gonna go behind my back, he doesn't have the character to be a leader, because he doesn't understand how to be part of the global organization where he fits in now, as opposed to where he's trying to go. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think as a big part of that character aspect is also, it's going to, if they have the proper character, they are going to continue to raise up their level of skill.
Yep.
And not just theirs, but around them.
Lifelong learning, right?
Yeah, it's reciprocal.
If people view you as a lifelong learner and you're out there talking to them about getting better and why, then, you know, people do what you do. They don't just do what you say, right? I mean, that's the mirror that you have to have, right? Is people look at you and say, well, he's telling me to be a lifelong learner, except every time he comes to me, he's asking me for questions, right? Now, I might ask you questions because in my quest for knowledge and getting better, I want to see where people are growing, right? But I mean, when we were at Silent Circle, there was an unbelievable amount of young people who come in, hey, guess what I just found? Guess what I just learned? Why? Because whether they're reading blogs, news feeds, or whatever, even when they weren't working on their free time, they were still wanting to be better and understand what at the time was a nascent space, and how to make themselves better and provide value, because everybody's got to do something that somebody else isn't doing to be successful, right? And that's the culture of a good tribe.
2 quick points. One, I'm massively interested in this idea you just expressed about talent being a floor, or competency being a floor, right? And character being a ceiling. You can predict that ceiling, by the way, psychologically. You can measure somebody's personality dimensions and with a high degree of accuracy, super high degree. I'm not talking about Myers-Briggs, right? Because that's largely bullshit. But there's actual dimensions to personality that you can reliably measure and super accurate. So you can predict who's capable, who ought to be capable based on their temperament. That doesn't mean they have the will, so forth and so on, right? But then maybe that just becomes an exercise of inoculating them to the chaos and the failure. I'd be really interested to work with you guys to study that, by the way.
That'd be pretty cool.
Dude, that's really interesting shit, especially within the tech space, because it's so dynamic just by its nature. Okay? So I may send you guys an email later on about this, because I'm really mystified by that.
Okay.
2, for the record, I was thinking about, I'm about due for a new phone, and I went and looked at the OnePlus 7T, and I shed a tear, because that's what black phones should have fucking been.
Yeah, OnePlus has their poop in one sock, as we used to say. They've got it going on. I had the 7 Pro. I got it because we were doing some Android stuff, and I was like, no, that's the only one I want. Yeah. I think if you look now with some of the issues the Pixel 4 is having when it comes out, I think that's really that's a great phone. But I think that you brought up a great point about leadership. Great leadership is all about temperament, right? I've said this about, and I've said it to the person later on, because they said, hey, I heard you said something bad about me, right? And I said, well, what did you hear I said? Like, let's start with because if I said something, which I'm most inclined, if I said it, I'm going to own it. But if it went past 8 people, I want to see how it came back around, when we closed the loop on that.
Yeah, right.
When people get to be leaders, and I don't say that, actually, let me say this. When people get to be CEOs, right? Because I think there's a big difference between being a CEO and being a leader, right? And I've said this about smart people, right? And I think some of that talent is intellectually what you were given in college, your brain pan, like how you can absorb information and things like that. I think some people are highly intellectually capable of being a Fortune 50 CEO. But I also think they completely and utterly lack the temperament to do that, right? And that's the part where character becomes your limiting factor, because you can't get past yourself. And it's the old adage, right? If somebody comes up to me and they're like, they always think the world's trying to screw them over, right? I think, hey, intrinsically, they're looking for a shortcut. And because they do it, they impose that will on themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at people that are emotionally, I think, unable to achieve absolute greatness, in some cases, it goes back to their childhood, trauma, things like that. But it's like, where did the wheels come off the cart that they couldn't move past that, that's created that person that is unbelievably gifted at something, but limits their effectiveness by what comes out of their mouth?
Yeah, right.
Really affects people, right? I think that's an interesting study as well.
Yeah. Man, I'm telling you, I can't stop thinking about this. This is really interesting. Because, of course, character, barring some extreme circumstances, can be modified. There's some flaws that are irrecoverable, right? But for the most part, with proper, let's say, treatment, I'm using that term generically, you can modify yourself, or through help with somebody else, you can modify character traits over time.
I don't think I'll use character in a different way. I think character is intrinsic, right? And I will also say that I haven't done that well all the time, right? You want to get someplace in a hurry, and I heard a guy, it was like a quick little blast on one of the social media platforms, and he's a big public speaker. He was talking to young people, and he's like, he was out and he said, hey, I heard this young person said, hey, I got scammed out of this $5,000. He's like, no, you didn't. You wanted something too fast. Right. And I thought that was a great way to look at it. Right. And I don't think that's a character flaw. I think there's character flaws, and then there's letting your character down. Right.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I say your character being one of those voices that sits on your shoulders, right? Good and bad. Right.
Yeah.
And I think some days you let your character down. And if we're gonna say that in order to be better, I have to spend time with me, right? To get to know people better, we spend time with them. So spend time with yourself. But that character, you're letting them down. Some people, they're sociopaths and narcissists and everything else, right? But I think you more let yourself down in that realm. And I've done it, and everybody's done it, right? Because you think, hey, I can get here quickly, and you can't cheat the process.
Not for long.
Right.
Certainly not for long.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Hey, Dan, you wanted to publish, fucker.
What's that?
I said you wanted to publish something. Here we go.
Yeah. It's about time.
Well, look, man, I don't mind doing a lot of the skunk work on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really compelling idea. Oh, man, I don't know. I got to think about this.
I don't know if you guys have ever, because it's the thing that's fascinating me is about, I think a lot of the character, the issue, and it's not character, it's like intrinsically, people have a hard time compartmentalizing, right?
Okay, sure.
And as a leader, your ability, and I think, Dan, we talked about this a little, your ability to compartmentalize your personal feelings to achieve a better goal is huge, right? And I think a lot of that, there has to be an intrinsic and a deep-seated method of self-regulation that you have to have. And you have to feel that you have control of your life to have that. And then I think in varying states, people feel they do. And I don't, when I feel like I'm not in control of things, I don't mean from like I'm a control freak or OCD. It's like, you feel like, hey, my life is kind of generally where it needs to be, and I'm walking, and I just need to do this a little bit, as opposed to I need to take a 90-degree turn to the left because something really went wrong, right?
Right.
But there was a big psychological study that they did nationwide, and it was at Starbucks. And I don't know how they got Starbucks to buy into this. And somebody was telling me this story while we were standing at a Starbucks, and I found it fascinating. And then I got hit right in the face with the point of the research. It was a statement of how can we, in a very innocuous way, find out what people feel they have of self-control, like how much control they feel they have in their own lives. And so they deployed thousands of researchers around. And it was, 4 or 5 questions. And the first thing was like, hey, please tell us what you ordered for a drink, right? And how you modified it, if you modified it or anything like that. And what they found over it's like 4 or 5 years of research was that the people that had the most control in their life, or felt that they had the most self-control in their life, had the most simple drink orders, right? And the people that felt they were out of control or had no control over what they had the most complex drink orders. So I'm standing in line with Morgan, and we're out in Coronado. Morgan and I are talking about this, and it's this woman in front of us, and all of a sudden she just pulls up her cell phone and points it at the barista and goes, "Make this." And when she turned her thing around, it looked like a recipe, right? It was like she gets over there, and at the end of it, oh, you put half a pump too much of raspberry in there. Like you can taste that, right?
Right.
That
with all that other stuff mixed in.
Right. Yeah. That to me was absolutely fascinating. Right. And then, Morgan and I walk up and we're like, hey, can we have a black cup of coffee, no room for cream?
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some days I want to order off the menu. Right. And I mean, as a metaphor, right? In life, you want to say, no, I don't want what's here. I want something else. But you have an internal self-regulatory mechanism. Even if it's like, I don't want to get crazy. I don't want to spit in my food, metaphorically.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think get in the middle of the room a little bit.
I think it's also a good analog as a way to figure out where people are putting their energy. In other words, if I don't have a lot of control or opportunity to invest energy in, let's say, being productive in this thing, right? That energy is always there. So it's going to manifest in a way where now I'm going to exert it on something that really is, I think we could all agree, meaningless. Like your fucking pumpkin spice latte. Like that's meaningless. It's absolutely meaningless. But if you don't have anything else you can control and feel good about, you're gonna do that.
Right.
So you can see this like in dogs too, right? Talk about leadership. Most dogs can't lead. And so if you let them, and they'll go absolute ape shit. They'll chew stuff, they gotta get that anxiety out and that energy out, and they can't be productive, so they just get destructive. There's always an if. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so if they're not productive, they're destructive. There's your little soundbite, by the way.
Right. You do that internally yourself. But
I like my pumpkin spice lattes.
Yes,
Fuck
you do.
You don't do that. Come on.
Of course I do.
Yes, he does.
Oh my God.
You can't get as sweet as Dan without a little pumpkin spice, baby.
I love it.
Come on.
I love my pumpkin spice
Work
latte.
with me. But no, I think largely when people get destructive, and I'll say this from personal experience, you feel trapped, right?
Yeah.
You want a certain outcome, you want to go in a certain place, and you feel you've been stymied, right? And so it manifests itself in some really horrible ways. You start blaming others, you start doing everything. And so the amount of energy you have in any given day to move forward with your life and do things, you halt that, right? Now, there's certain things in my life I'm always going to believe are wrong, and say, hey, what happened there was wrong, right? But until I decided I wanted to stop trying to seek resolution to that and just say, F it, that's what it is, and it's going to be that way, it's a limiting factor, right? It's a limiting factor with relationships. It's a limiting factor with everything else that you've got to decide. And sometimes those are really hard decisions, like, hey, I'm not going to get over it, so I can't have you in my life. Or I am getting over it because I want you in my life, or I want this certain outcome to change. Right.
And I think that's more what you meant by character, right?
Right. But that's where people get lost, right? And sometimes I grew up from sports and then 20 years of being where there's always people around to help. Right. And you look, and I've talked about this before, you can tell people that play teams in any kind of SEAL training scenario of a basic nature, you can, before you get to know somebody, you can tell somebody that played a team sport and somebody that did an individual activity like like swimming, running, even wrestling, right?
Mhm.
Because you say you're on a team, but if I don't wrestle well, I individually lose the match. We get less points, but nobody is going to potentially get injured, or the outcome is not going to be altered by the fact that I didn't win.
Right.
Whereas if you're playing baseball, if you're playing football is probably or basketball. Hey, I don't do what I'm going to do. I'm putting somebody else in peril to have to suck up for me and doing that. Right. But I've grown up in an environment. Where there's always somebody to bounce something off of. Right. And so, a bit ago, but in the recent past, I got in a position where I was not in a good place. And I also felt there was no one there to help. If for no other reason, then some of the traditional mentors I had, it wasn't in their wheelhouse. It wasn't something I would ask, because it's like, I don't want to put them in a bad position to feel bad they can't help me, right? And the people I thought should help wouldn't, right? Wouldn't, couldn't, whatever that is, right? They're going to say couldn't, right? And they'll have their reasons, right? But if I'm saying wouldn't, I'm going to call those reasons excuses.
Yeah, sure.
And once you get past that, that's when you can grow, do things, and get back to being great and go back to being a leader. Because during that time, you're not. Because you've got to focus. Everything is focused on the inside. It's not focused on taking care of other people. And you can't be great.
No.
Whatever you think that is.
Because character is self-limiting most of all. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, the hardest part about being a leader is that you have to give more of yourself to everyone else. And and a lot of times it's exhausting. I
actually enjoy that. Like, that to me is, but here's the downside of this, is when your bad self, like I always say, you got a good self and a bad self. Every day you want the good self to be at 52%.
Yeah.
Right. You know it's not gonna be perfect, but I gotta be on the good side, right? To be a good human, you at least gotta walk over there most days. Right?
I go the opposite.
When you get to your bad place, I think, I would hope, and from my experience, I think good leaders internalize that.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to take it out on anybody else. And your ability to compartmentalize that and keep that to yourself while you got a positive face to everybody else is good for the organization, but ultimately it's going to tear you up. Right? Because at some point you've got to be healed. However that works, whether it's I walk away from society for a while and I go, Vision Quest style, or I have a mentor where it's going to help me work it out. Right? And that high functioning character, here's the problem with great leaders when they get stuck. They look in the mirror and they look at other people and they think that they should behave like them. And when people act the way people act, which is largely in their own self-interests, they don't understand it. I don't get that sometimes. I really don't, right? And I recently had somebody say to me, and it's profound, stop looking at other people and seeing yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, sure. Right?
Because that's where when I go to my dark place, it is because I look at other people and I see myself and I go, why aren't you helping? Why aren't you doing something to be made better? When I'm good, I get it. I understand it, right? And I go, okay, you're going to do you, but I'm going to use you doing you to the betterment of the group, whether you realize it or not.
Right.
Well, hey, my friends, I have to go catch a plane, so I got to get to the airport.
Have fun with that.
So,
have fun with PTW.
Yeah. Well, and I got to run too, so we can call it here. That's a good place to end.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in this idea. I'll email you guys next Sunday again.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Same time. That's episode 145.
Peace out.
Have a good weekend. Cheers, everybody.